Welcome to Data Pandit. So I was talking about the component properties in my last video. So today also we are going to continue with that, and we are going to talk about two more properties, which is parameters properties of a particular component, and how this interpretation would be working for a particular and for a particular file or for a particular value. Okay, and how the layout will play an important role in component configuration. Okay, so let's switch over to our document which I prepared for you so that we can understand better. So this is volume 2 of the component properties. So access. So this is also we have we have to talk about actually. So this access is also applicable for input and output files. Okay, for input file component, let's say what are the different properties we have in input file. Okay, so let's say I have created one input file for a particular graph. So if you look at the properties of that input file component, so there will be a first property would be file handling. Delete the file after the last phase that reads it completes. So what if you we normally don't check this box, okay? We don't do this. But if you need to do it, if you want to delete that file after after your read process completes, then you can do it. And also the file protection. So in Unix, we know that there are user and groups and others, right? Okay, so read, write, and execute properties. So similarly, we have a user group and other over here, and we can specify those properties while creating. So these property would be for input file, intermediate file, lookup file, and output file as well. So while considering and depending upon the uses, you can signify whenever you are creating the file and you are specifying particular file protection. Then depending upon those file protection you have picked and you chosen, depending upon that data set is going to be behave. Okay, if you are specifying that no other should be reading and writing or executing, then you can uncheck those boxes. Okay, you understood, right? So whenever we are writing the files and you have chosen that others should not read and write and execute, you unclick those these boxes, okay, while configuring the output file component. Similarly for intermediate and all. And for input file, these by default will come depending upon the who have that created this file. Okay, so that would be not in our control basically. So that will be displayed whenever you configure the input file over here. Okay, as it is. Okay, now we can talk about output file components. There are multiple, few more actually. This is input file. There are few more for output file actually. Along with file protection, there are other file handling properties for output file. Okay, this will be applicable for component and lookup and intermediate file. So these properties are similar for these three type of component, which is output file, lookup, and intermediate file. So if the file does not exist, if you want to create the file, then you can click on it. Okay. Sometimes what we need to do is we need to append the data and and if the file is not existed, we self fail the graph. Okay. So you want to choose fail, then it will be failing if it doesn't exist. Normally we by default it is a create file as a by default selected. And other properties is if the file exists, do you want to delete and recreate the file or do you want to append the file? So normally there will be a delete and recreate. So whatever, so mostly we have a daily process or monthly process. We want to create delete that existed data set. We want to overwrite that file. Okay. So normally we do that, but for some exceptional cases, depending upon the requirement, we pick and choose the append to file. We can append the data to the file. This also can be normally used. And if the file doesn't exist, we also can fail the graph. Okay? But this is rarely used actually. And these two properties, depending upon the rarest of the rare use case, we can do that. Upon job, we'll roll the roll file back to the last statement. This also can be chosen. Okay, write the only when phase completes. So whenever the let's say our output file is getting created in second phase. Okay, so the all the content would be written after second phase completes actually. It doesn't it will hold the data until then. Okay, and at the last moment this is going to be written to the file. This also we don't normally use actually. And also the file production properties. So I was talking about while talking about this input file. So similarly there are file protection over here as well. And we have access for the table also. So if we so this is the access for output table. Okay, so if we select the output table, and we can, if the table doesn't exist, we can create the table. So by default this is the configuration, but in other circumstances we can truncate also the table before loading if it is already exist. So sometimes we have a refresh table refresh process actually. So what we do is table refresh, we can truncate all the data before loading into the all the new data. Okay, so that also can be selected truncate table viewer. So rather than doing truncation using the truncate or run table run program component, or run SQL component. So not run program, run SQL component. Instead we can do using the same output table component. We can truncate the data and load the data. So these are the access level properties for a different data set. It may not be available for all the other components, right? So access would be for any particular data set or table, and so it should not be available for reformat or join or other components, right? The processing component, the program component. Okay. Now there are parameters. So this is mostly available, mostly available in all the components. Okay. So normally we use the reformat components. Okay, reformat, join, rollup, scan, and dedupe sorted, sort. All those parameters would be containing this parameter section. Okay. So I'm not talking about particular parameters for here, because I have multiple other videos which already describe the parameters for different components. Even if we have left out multiple components as well, so we would be picking and choosing and describing those components in later videos. Here, this is particularly for how those parameters can be configured and also can be interpreted, basically, while making sure the process happens as we want. So in a particular component, so what can be done? Right? So there will be a, so let me go to the pictorial view. So there will be seeing how the parameter section of a particular component looks like. So this is a join join properties of a particular graph, particular component, basically. So if you look at it here, right? So this is a particular join component, and we have different parameters over here, count parameter, sorted, and then there is a transform component as well. Okay, and the transform component. So I need to talk about type and these source parameters. How these transform can be configured actually. So normally in parameter section there will be these properties would be there. Propagate from neighbor, use another port in graph, use file, embed. But most of the cases, we do not use these properties. We just use these two properties, use file, embed properties for a transform parameter, like these parameters, right? So we know that transform can be embedded, also can be used from a particular XFR file or something, right? So in those cases, what we pick and choose is whenever we want to create a separate, the transform in a file and want to use here. Why we create transform in file is that file could be used at multiple places, or also it is recommended to use the file and refer that file in a component rather than hard coding or embedding. So because embedded is hard to read. Okay, if we have XFR file, that could be a little bit isolation, and also the maintainability is good. So we don't have to create, modify the graph. If we have to modify the XFR, and that would be sufficient if any changes comes in mapping and all. So we don't have to go and modify the graphs. And if it is used at multiple places, we can modify the XFR, and that XFR can be referenced in multiple places. So we don't have to modify the multiple graphs in that sense. Okay. So we recommend to use the XFR in a file. If that is the case, then we use the use file component, use file properties for this transform parameter. Okay. But otherwise, we use the embed, and we can specify the transform logic here. So we can go to edit, and you can specify. Okay. So we want to validate this, if you want to, why, so I'm talking about these buttons actually. Okay, so if you want to edit, you can go and edit. And if there are some dollar parameters used, or I mean the parameters you use, if you want to resolve it, then you go to resolve, and you can see the actual values at that moment. And generate, so generate is also another button, so we can create and generate the particular all the function for a particular embedded data set, embedded transform. Okay, and we can export this to a parameter level, or pset level, or a so that we can take the transform from the parameter set pset as well. So we can export this parameter to the pset level. And finally, there is an interpretation. So so there are multiple places wherein there is an interpretation. So whenever you have to specify an parameter, there will be an interpretation. This property would always be there. So what is that? So how you are going to how the component is going to interpret the parameter. So that is the specification over here. So let's say I have created this parameter. Parameter value is let's say parameter value is profit. Okay, and there could be two values like profit and loss. Okay, so I could specify parameter a, and its value as a profit. Okay. This is one way. And I can, before that, if I want to specify just a profit, I don't want to create any parameter. I just want to specify only the profit. Okay. I don't want to use any parameters. So whenever I need to use this value, let's say key. So we want to specify only the constant. I just want to specify profit. Okay, over here. Or I can specify that dollar a. If you want to specify like this, and I can specify dollar a. Okay, dollar a. So if I select dollar a here in key, then I need to interpret as a dollar this one. Or if I want to specify dollar this way, okay, then I can choose the another one. Okay, middle bracket and dollar. And if my parameter is calculated as a PDL, so I need to create a PDL. Okay, I have parameter, and let's say I have created this PDL. Okay, there are multiple. So there is another video which is describing the PDL. So I can create PDL in multiple ways. I can use functions. I can make use of different other parameters which I already defined. So let's say I have created some PDL. Okay, date time some value. Okay, let's say I'm taking simple DD. Okay, let's say I have defined some subdate. Okay. Some subdate is another parameter. Okay. So out of that I created one PDL. So while specifying, I could specify $A and I could specify the parameter interpretation as a PDL. Okay. Now there is a DML resolution. So this is there is a DML resolution. What is DML resolution is? So DML resolution, whenever you create a parameter and you specify it is a DML resolution, okay? So that would be allowing you to create, allowing you to use the different parameters without, referring using dollar, and it also allows multiple functions. On the fly, you can create, different DMLs using meta programming function, using all other existed function or other, So, for example, what is DML resolution is? For example, let me take one example. Let's say I have specified one parameter p, and I want to refer it as a. I don't want to specify the dollar. I have created parameter a as a profit, okay, and I want to create p, another parameter which is defined as a DML resolution, okay. So if I specify like that p is equal to a, then what would be printing? Profit. I don't have to specify using dollar. This is one way. Another thing is, like, if you want to create one parameter b, and if I want to create, let's say, one, I can specify the comments over here. This is my parameter. So what is the resolution? If I specify it as a DML resolution, then output would be 1. Okay. So this is how we can differentiate the DML resolution. So what is recommended is, mostly the recommendation is DML resolution, because we don't have to specify it. It allows to use a different meta programming function, on the fly. We don't have to use. There are restrictions in DML, PDL. So all those restrictions are not available, like escape sequences, dollar resolution. Those kind of restrictions are not there in the DML resolution. But there are, case interpretation is also there, so it's not there available over here. So there is a script, representation. So which is not recommended nowadays. If it is used in existed and we don't want to modify that graph, that it is okay, but it is not recommended to use the KSS interpretation. We don't use the KSS anymore. So this is highly unrecommended, and because there are two reason why we are not recommending it. First is, it is dependency analysis is difficult, while because it's an outside, right, dependency script, because Unix is involved over here. So it's recommended to use the PDL rather than for dependency analysis purpose. Okay, dependency analysis. Okay, so dependency analysis is difficult. So if we have to do dependency analysis, then you need to replace the KSS parameter using the PDL. So this is very easily can be replaced. Now, okay, I have talked about all the interpretation. Okay, so they would be available in most of the places actually. So all the places, let's say, for all the parameters, there will be interpretation, and all those parameters can be referred, you know, from the pset or any other place. Okay, or a graph level or a project level parameters. Some other parameters may not be. There are definite values, like for join time there are only 3. So there cannot be there cannot be any parameters reference, but you can export those parameters to the pset level. Okay, I mean join time can be exported to the pset level, so that we can choose while runtime whether it is inner join or outer join or right outer join, depending upon the pset configuration. Okay, now this is the output table component. So I have talked about the parameters of input and one processing component like join component. Similarly, there will be a reformat component and roll up and all. So depending upon the characteristics of any particular component, all those parameters would be defined. So I have talked about these parameters in detail in our earlier videos. So if there are multiple components which are pending actually, so we will be talking about in future. So let me talk about some. So see here in output table also. So there are parameter section and we have different parameters like commit table and all. Right? Row ID, duplicates, array interface, paper size, package, reject threshold and all. Mostly reject threshold, logging, error log and log group, error group, and these are default parameters in each of the most of the components. Okay, that you probably know. And here there will be again, so how to use, mostly we use file and embed in this kind of component. We don't use propagate from embed and use another code in graph, right? So these are the some properties which are not getting used, okay, in output table component. So this is the value API, and there is a so whenever you specify output table component. So there are two types of data load process actually, API load and utility load. So I think API and utility I will be talking about in detail when we use the API and why we use utility actually. So in brief, I can say that mostly API, whenever we have a less number of data and daily processing, then mostly use API actually. And we want to take a control of, want to see the data loading process, right? Record by record, then we mostly use the API mode. Utility mode is used for a black load, okay? So this is, you can understand like that, but in detail, there are multiple differences and multiple use cases in the sense why we use API for a particular use case and why we don't use the utility in that sense, okay? So I think I have talked about parameter section in detail. So next video I'm going to talk about the layout and ports. Okay, so layout is very important and ports as well. So these two significant properties which we normally configure. I mean mandatory to configure in a particular component. Okay, so thank you so much for watching and please.